Richie. Thanks for the very kind introduction, Jeremy. Today I am giving a webinar called How to Write a Great Success Story. I'm glad to hear we have such a wide range of participants on the phone today, including quite a few of our public affairs specialists from the NRCS, because they are key to your success as well. And when I say you, I'm talking primarily to the SGI SWAT folks, but it can be anyone who lives in a rural community out there and is doing some wonderful projects on the ground with landowners. And I know for the SGI SWAT folks that you actually have to write a story for your paper, so pay good attention today. I have decided I could just boil this down for you in about 20 minutes or so to 5 key steps for your success. So today we'll be going through how you choose your story, how you kind of get your idea out there for publications and they give you the yes, go ahead, do the research, that's getting out there in the field in the interview, writing your first draft, finalizing, and sending it off. Step 1, when you choose your story, the first thing you want to do is to identify your audience and think about who you are writing for. Now, today, this picture here shows Connie and Bill, who I just met not too long ago over in DuBois at the Grouse Days. Connie drives the school bus, and Bill gave the tour. We drove around and looked at grouse. It was fantastic. And I got a really good sense from them of something that I didn't realize is that there are so many people who live among sage grouse and DuBois who know very little about the bird, and in fact can drive by them on the Lex and not even notice it. So you can't assume necessarily that you've got an educated audience that's joining the conference. So you will, the good thing is a lot of you know the people that you're writing for already. You know what their values are. You know what people are interested in at the coffee shops. And specifically if there are ranchers who are reading the paper and your story, they might want to be knowing how they can enroll and how they can be part of this SGI success. Make it personal. When you think about writing your story, don't think in terms of the acreages and the numbers of junipers and how many miles of fence. Think about the people who are out there actually applying some of the Sage Grouse Initiative and conservation practices on the ground. And who do you know that can help you tell the big story? So go through your list of the people you work with and say, who might be the best interview? Now, it doesn't have to be a rancher or a landowner. It could be some volunteer or a researcher in your community. Don't forget, sage grouse. You've got a sexy subject, so you're going to be confident when you go in on this because the bird itself is very jazzy. And we've got an incredible subject, and I want to make sure we all remember that whenever we're going forward in presentation. And also, the sage grouse is connected to other amazing wildlife that people particularly care about, like mule deer and pronghorn and elk, songbirds. What studies have shown is that people actually care more about wildlife habitat and wildlife in general than they do one species at a time, even though we have some specific user groups. So when you're writing about the Sage Grouse Initiative, make sure you bring in other animals. Okay, so you've got your audience in mind. You're thinking a little bit about the bird itself. Now, what's the real news? You have so many things going on you probably want to write about, and likely you'll have more than one opportunity to do that. I'm giving you an example here of a great news hook that helped Scott Scroggie when he wrote his story in Eli. And that was Don Phillips, a local rancher, came in to the office and basically said this: I was headed out in the field, the sage grouse took off, they headed right for that fence, but sure enough at the last minute they went up and over those markers. Well, that's phenomenal. How many times do we have a participant actually witnessing one of our conservation projects working? So that became Scott's hook, his story, and his angle about fence markers preventing grouse collisions. He was able then to tie in his larger program. The step two, after you've kind of got your story chosen, is to pitch, not stitch. Pitch is kind of a favorite word that people use in the journalism world. Pitch your idea. So you might want to jot down the news, the hook, the approach, and share it first with your public affairs specialist in your state and with me, and we might give you a few tips. Then you can contact your local newspaper, and you will also have us on board with it so we know your story's coming. When you contact your local paper, and I'm assuming it's your paper, it's likely the kind of place where you already know the editor, and you can stop in and see them in person. You can also send an email and follow up with a phone call. This we're not going to go over in detail. I'm putting it in here, and you can look at it later because this will be posted. But this is an example of actually writing more of a pitch or a query, where it's one I did for Western Livestock Journal that resulted in an article where I needed to write out what I was doing and give it a heading and an angle that ranchers were going to be speaking up about their perspective on the Sage Grouse Initiative. Okay, step 3. This is the big part. You're going to go out in the field and do the research. In this case, we're going to assume you're going to go talk to one of your rancher landowners that's participating in SGI. So when you think about going out there, it's pretty much the same way you think about going out to meet them with them for a ranch plan or some other project. You want to make sure you're going at a time that's good for them. You want to really accommodate their schedule. What to bring with you? These seem pretty obvious, but it's not bad to have a list like this. A notebook and a pen, and the kind of notebook I like, this little clip isn't really my favorite. I actually like those journalist reporter notebooks that you can pick up at places like Staples or where they're long and skinny and they flip over. They're just a little nicer, but anything that's easy to hold in the field and write notes on, as well as indoors. I'm also putting down a digital voice recorder if you have one. You also can use your iPhone. I've done pretty well using that recording. And when you are sitting on a table, you might want to record it. And then you can go back and look more closely at the conversation. You're not going to want to record your whole few hours. And remember, it's just an option. If you're a great note taker, you don't need to. But sometimes I do both. And certainly you want to take notes and record if you're going to record. Bring your camera. And I'm mentioning video, and there are people on today who have a lot of experience there. But I have kind of a new idea for you to consider is to start filming short segments of ranchers on the ground, just 1-minute type of pieces, where we can use those on our SGI website. So keep that in mind. That's a little separate, but I'm mentioning it. And then you should have a list of your key questions and your reminder notes already thought out before you go. Once you're out there, you're going to be probably doing 2 things. You're going to be likely sitting down inside, maybe in the kitchen, and you'll be out in the field, actually looking at things. So which order you do that in is not important. However, I do think you might want to think about the photography, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. If you can be out in the field when it's morning or evening, it's certainly better for photos. Tips for the interviews. This is an easy one for you too, and you know this pretty well. You start with something like the weather. You don't go right into the Endangered Species Act. So just chat, make sure everybody's comfortable. Explain the story. Now, you've already told them you're going to do this story, but once you're out there, you want to go over it a little bit again. This is what we're hoping for and that's what you'll be doing. Now, when you're actually asking them questions, there's some things you can think about to steer the conversation and to get more information. Some people are naturally great to interview. They're just going to tell you a great story. Others are going to say, how's the Sage Grouse Initiative going for you? And they'll go, great. Well, you want to hear more than great, so you can use the tell me more about that technique. Oh, can you tell me more about that? Or how did it go with such and such? And also, when you're jotting down notes, this takes practice, frankly. So it's an art, but you'll get better at it. You jot down what's interesting, not everything. And feel free to ask people to repeat or clarify something that you think is important. When you're out in the field with them, you're going to be taking some notes, but you're going to be taking photos. And I also want to mention that you might want to take photos inside, too. Time of day, you can tell that the picture over to the right that I took of these two ranchers in Northern California was not ideal. It was in the middle of the day. Sometimes you don't have any choices and you just do the best you can. You also want action shots, and that's certainly what you'd be looking for. An editor would be looking for. They don't want too many posed pictures. If we have some, that's okay, but it's better to have people doing things, candid, and close-ups. People want to see the lines and the expressions and their faces, and you can do that with Zoom. You don't have to get right in somebody's face, but don't be afraid to do it. I know sometimes people are afraid of offending, but just say, hey, I need to get some pictures, and most people are fine. This last point I have on here about outside and inside, too, I use photography to remind me of things, sometimes just for the writing later. For instance, if I want to say that a rancher is multi-generational, rather than just saying that, I might be looking at my picture I took in the kitchen, and there's a grandfather clock there, and it's been in the family 4 or 5 generations. You might say that and it gives you a wonderful image of how long that family's been around. So use photos to remind you of details you might be using in the story later. Now we're on step 4 already. You've done the research, you're back, and maybe this is the part where you're going, oh, I don't want to do this. Writing is hard. Well, remember, it takes Sage Grouse males a few tries too, and the big thing you got to do is just get out there and plunge in and give it a try. As you do that, you want to apply what I call the so what test. This is something that I've taught before in interpretive writing, and it's just a good reminder, and it's kind of funny, of course, if you can see what it spells. Just remember that you've got an audience who's not in the classroom, they're not getting graded. They want your story to be enjoyable, relevant to them, thematic, meaning that it's got sort of a focus, like that fence marker story that I mentioned earlier. And it's organized. It's not all over the map and people are trying to figure out what happened when. We all know we have an inspiring subject already, so we're covered there. Compelling, think about all those articles you start reading on the front page of the paper and then you just never turn to look at the inside part. Well, you want them to turn the page. I strongly suggest a rough outline before you start writing. It'll help you think about your story and you're not just writing from nowhere. This sounds a little bit like teaching a high school essay, but it's a little different. It does have a beginning, middle, and end, but in journalism, you want to put your big message and your news up high in the story, and you want, by high I mean in the first paragraph, and you want that hook that draws people in. So you've got maybe 1, 2, 3 paragraphs to keep people's attention. So we call this the inverted triangle in journalism, but that's not quite what I'm talking about here. What I'm really talking about is just a hook that draws people into the story, but we are getting some main message or news up front that we're going to then prove. We're going to prove that point all through the middle with examples. And it's nice at the end. I like to have a quote or a sentence that refers back to the beginning. And speaking of quotes, those are pretty important. And you're going to look through your notes and you're going, is this a good quote or not a quote? A great quote evokes an image. It gives a personal perspective. These are a couple that I used when I was over covering the Pioneer Alliance gathering near Haley, Idaho, when ranchers spoke up about why they had put conservation easements on their land. We feel like this is a dream come true for us, And then we got another one. Our ranch has been in the family for more than 100 years, said Terry Clark. We'd like to keep it together and not see it develop. Those are the kind of quotes you're looking for. A bad quote is a fact that doesn't need quote marks, and it doesn't sound like a real person talking, and it's too long, and that's a danger of tape recording. Sometimes you end up putting down a huge paragraph. So if we have, in quotes, Tim Griffith saying the Sage Grouse Initiative is a highly targeted and science-based landscape approach to enhance and conserve rangelands for sage grouse, that's a bad quote, because you can just say that. In fact, that is a great description of the program and something that you can use up high in the story without any quotes around it. We know that Tim would probably use the word awesome in a quote. You've done your first draft. It tends to be a little messy. Mine always is. So I have to go back and look at certain things. And there could be a whole webinar just on this. But today I'm going to give you 2 writing tips. One is I want you to think about how do you make that prose sing. And one way to do it is to clean out those bureaucratic jargon words. These are some of my pet peeves that come up all the time in SGI, and I know they're perfectly wonderful to use among each other, but when we're writing a success story for the layperson, don't use them. You want, instead of using that implement word that everybody loves, I want you to say carry out. You can carry out a project. You don't have to implement it. A rancher instead of a producer. Juniper invasion or spread instead of encroachment. Sagebrush dependent wildlife, not obligate. We don't want words in there that people just are lost on. My second writing tip is to say it shorter. As I said, my first drafts are always too long, and we'll talk about length a little bit later, but in general, shorter pieces are good, and one way to make them shorter is simply to be efficient in your sentences. And here's an example for you, and this helps you keep your reader's attention. In a first draft, we have below, local cattle ranchers Don and Sheila Phillips of Ely, Nevada, are the owners and operators of the Steptoe Valley Ranch and have been in the cattle business for several years. Well, it's fine, but all you really need to say is that Don and Sheila Phillips own and operate the Steptoe Valley Ranch here at Ely. And that's indeed how it ended up in the final. Your next step is to finalize and send it. And in this phase, I suggest you read it. I suggest you read it out loud for flow and making sense, and try it out on a coworker or a friend. You certainly want to check accuracy, the names, the facts, the dates, make sure everything's spelled correctly. And then once again, you're looking at this length. And I'd say a good story length if you want one, and maybe some of the PAS folks have some thoughts on this afterwards. But I'd shoot for something around between 500 and 1,000 words, maybe 700. Sometimes you can even go shorter. It depends on the subject. And here's something that's very important I'd like you to do is to run your piece by your public affairs specialist for your state and me, and then we can help you make some final changes. When you're there, you'll have it. You're going to want to send it in a format that's a simple Word document, double space, easy to read. Your separate photo attachments should be JPEGs. I'd shoot for something around a megabyte. Don't huge files, but not small files. Do not do your own layout, and I'm saying this because several people have tried that with me, and I'm like, no, now you have to take it all apart and put it back to where it was. It looks pretty, but that's just not the way that editors want to see it. The other thing I want to say in here, too, is if your public affairs specialist is so critical because they want your story and they want to know what you're doing. And now if you are not working with the NRCS in a partnership, then you can go straight to me, and that's fine as well. So yeah, there it is. You've got your article. Hooray. And what I want to say about this one, this is Josh White's piece, and he had just a fantastic result working with Alexis Collins out of Idaho, Public Affairs, and me on this. But really, I got to give a lot of credit, of course, to Josh and to Alexis, because Alexis was able to get this out through her venues on the website for NRCS in Idaho, and she, as a result, in addition to the local newspaper, I'm going to find my list here, but she was able to get this published in not only here, the Hawaii Avalanche, but the Glens Ferry paper, the Mountain Home newspaper. It's on the deck for being in the Western Stockton. We had to shorten it a bit for that. And I believe it's going to show up in the Progressive Rancher as well. And of course, we feature this on our SGI website and Facebook. And when it's on our website, it can get picked up anywhere. So the great thing is you can multiply the effects of your article, the impacts, the positive impacts for SGI. It's fantastic, and we rely on you for spreading the SGI message. This I'm putting in just quickly because we've already covered the main things, but I wanted to show you a template I have, and so you'll have this on this PowerPoint that you'll have access to on the Sage Grouse Initiative website. Noah, based in Colorado, asked me to do this for him, and I said that is a great idea. And for all of you, if you need a quick template for a story that you're putting out for a newsletter or something else, I did that for you here, and you can modify it. And now we're ready for a little bonus that Jeremy asked me to put in. That's tips on talking to the press. How can you help the press write the great success story? Because often they are the ones writing it. I've given you 9 tips today. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. You want to cultivate your reporters and help them learn. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be upset when they've got something wrong. Remember, it's a long-term relationship, you hope, and they can get better because sometimes they do make mistakes. And to help them not make mistakes, you want to provide them with some good materials and the right contacts. Guide them to the people you want to speak with. And what's helpful if you know you're going to be talking to the press is to have some of your own talking points already sitting in front of you to refer to, right? Your key messages. And this is critical, especially when the press is maybe going to want to ask you things that are highly controversial, that aren't where we want to go. We pride ourselves in Sage Grouse Initiative on staying above the fray. And one way you stay above the fray is when somebody asks you, well, what do you think about those ravens killing all those sage grouse? You can go back to our points about what we do for sage grouse to help them habitat stay intact and as healthy as possible. So go back to what your main message is. Don't go down there where we don't want to go into the muck. Stay above the fray. Be ready, too, when you're talking to the press with some good examples of what we mean by the work that we're doing on the ground with ranchers. And number 6, don't speculate. You're always on the record with the press. So you don't want to say, hey, between you and me, just don't do it. 7, take your time. Speak a little slowly. Don't sound too slow, but it doesn't hurt to slow down a little bit. Remember, they're taking notes, and they're going to appreciate that. Since you've written your own success story, you'll know that as well, that it's nice when somebody's not talking a mile a minute. Always be friendly, courteous, and helpful to your reporters. And then last, go to the reporters for the story. Don't just wait for them. Think about some field trips, some good visual opportunities, some events of interest, and invite the press. Here's an example in Pinedale. Megan Dubrow worked with a reporter on this one and resulted in a beautiful piece. Now, Megan knows it had some mistakes in it, and she had the benefit in this case of being able to look at the piece and get some of those corrected. Now, most of the time, you will not be able to look at someone's piece ahead of time. They're working on deadlines, and also journalists don't want to share their pieces because there's a tendency for whoever's being quoted to want to change how it sounds to something that's not a real quote. And I suggest the same when you're doing your own success stories is to make sure you've got everything right. You can recheck facts and information, but I wouldn't share the story in general with the person you've interviewed, just so you can keep it fresh. So we're at the end. Summing it all up, I hope you've gotten what you needed out of writing a great success story. I just want to leave you with some confidence that you've got a great bird, a great story, that you can take a personal approach with the people that you know. And go ahead, plunge in, give it a try. Feel free to ask me for help at any time. And with that, we'll open it up for questions. Oh, you can either just speak up or you can use the hand. We'll be able to see the hand by your name on the screen.
Well, while people are thinking of questions, this is Jeremy here. I just got to say that was an absolute gold mine. Thank you so much, Deb.
You're welcome.
This is why, I wake up in the middle of the night excited about what we're doing, because I think this is a missing ingredient to conservation, telling the story of what you're doing so that, the public can understand the relevance. Is going to be key to our long-term success. And so, this is something most of us really don't get much training in, and we're just really excited to have you on board, and then also just the connections you've made with our public affairs staff to work as a team to really, utilize their skills and their expertise as well. Just really appreciate that. Hey, Deb and Jeremy, this is Ben Nevada. I do have one question. I mean, this is an awesome presentation. Will this PowerPoint be available later so we can kind of have it for our files to refer back to, because there's so much good information in all this?
Well, I'm glad you asked. That is our whole intention, that we have this recorded and we have the PowerPoint itself. They will be posted on the Sage Grouse Initiative website, and then I believe we can also provide that link so that you can post them in other places as well, right? Everyone's nodding. Tina and Laura, the experts on that end. Yes.
Yes. Along with the notes, we'll send a link to the website in the PowerPoint.
Great. Thank you. I've got a question for our public affairs staff that are online. Deb really hit on this point, but when we're working for and with government agencies, we do have to be careful about our messaging and the stuff that we put out there. And so I really appreciated the link back to public affairs staff for review. Do you guys have any additional information to provide on things that you consider and additional requirements that might be in place for review of stuff that goes public?
Jeremy, this is Sarah. I think the only thing I can think of is, depending on how big the store is, sometimes it's helpful to have a release form from the landowner, just making sure that they're comfortable with their photos and the story being, published, especially as you get to some of these larger papers and different kind of marketing venues. So it's not always required, but sometimes as you get bigger up into USDA, they do require having that kind of a sign off. So that's the only thing I can think of. Good job to sum it all that up.
Sarah, that made me think of something else. I believe that when you are taking pictures with children in them, that you do need definitely a model release. Do you want to speak on that a little bit, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's just always a good idea to have that, just to cover all your bases, and it's helpful to, just so you don't have to go back and get any of those things. So I generally try and do that in the get-go there, just to have it in case it comes up. I certainly, most of the time we don't need that, but it's just something that's nice to have. These stories are getting a lot of really great press, and we're seeing them, definitely move up higher than just those local newspapers. So, particularly in this case, it's probably just a good idea to have those release forms.
And we can provide, you have a good release form example that we can also send to everybody, right, Sarah?
Yeah, I think we all have, they're really simple, and we probably all have a copy of one we use.
If you need any help with that, that's where NRCS's public affairs staff is great. So feel free to help.
Deborah, this is Brenda in Wyoming. Sometimes it's okay to use stock photos. I know for the people in the field, it's very difficult to get pictures of the grouse because they're so skittish. So we do have stock photos on hand.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Brenda. And we also have the website gallery for SGI. All of those photos by Conservation Media are available for use always. And you can point the media's attention to them. We are going to be revamping and redoing the website. I'm very excited about that. And it will be, we hope, should be going live September 1st. And part of that will be a much easier to use photo gallery than we have now, where you can get exactly what you want. But thanks for bringing that up, Brenda. Excellent point.
This is Jeremy here. One other thought I had is I've learned the hard way. One of the things that get asked a lot, or maybe you slip into, is talking about the amount of money being spent. That we spend X amount, whatever. And you got to recognize the fiscal environment we're in, and that not everybody views government spending favorably. So, I guess Tim and Dave and I always think about, okay, how can we make sure that this is about the outcomes? What did we actually get on the ground? Not just, we spent $100 million of farm work programs. Well, there's no context for what does that mean, and what did it save us? Did it save us $200 million in, regulatory costs or what? So we try to avoid that and talk more about the outcomes for the bird, for the ecosystem, broader values for society.
And Jeremy, I'm glad you brought that up, too. This is Deborah. That I think that reminds me that we should be using that 2015 date of the listing decision so that we are tying these really important outcomes to this deadline when the Fish and Wildlife Service will be making their call on whether the sage grouse qualifies as threatened or endangered. So showing the outcomes is helping SGI and helping us and helping sage grouse conservation, especially bringing it in with that timing as well. Any other questions? Comments? If not, thank you very much. And Jeremy, I bet you have some more things you want to cover today in this last 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Deb, and we just really enjoy having you around. Thanks to our public affairs specialist